Poplio. Today, on the 27th day of my action, I will talk about the ethical benefits of a global population stabilization law. 3 days ago, I covered the political benefits. 2 days ago, the economic benefits. Yesterday, the social benefits. And today, we will look at the ethical benefits. Number one, truth and the right to know are sacrosanct. Every single page governments and the Vatican now hide in their archives under the pretense of national security or cultural preservation are crimes against humanity and the defilement and perversion of the truth. Never in history have secular and spiritual authorities classified more information than in our times, paradoxically, while at the same time they shamelessly profess transparency and integrity. The contents of the contracts signed by governments with vaccine manufacturers to hide the genocidal purpose of mRNA vaccines is a point in case and the most current example of hiding a depopulation crime. But all information they classify hides one or another aspect of the depopulation program. Once population control is addressed through a population stabilization law, the need for secrets and secrecy will evaporate. And anyone who as much as dreams about reclassifying population control will have to suffer capital punishment. Henceforth, any secrets will be seen and punished for the crimes they are and they enable. This will re-establish truth and anchor our civilization in it. Number two, justice and the right to fairness are sacrosanct. We are born with the innate ability to discern right from wrong, yet governments and organized religions have bastardized that to such an extent as to turn justice into injustice and fairness into falsehood. The entire judiciary, be it at the national or international level, acts as a last line of defense for the protection of crimes against humanity and genocide that governments and organized religions commit in order to reduce the population. The refusal of national and international courts to prosecute mass murderers like Fauci and Gates, Biden and Putin, Pope Francis and his cardinals, von der Leyen and the heads of all EU member states, and all others who have collaborated in the depopulation by vaccination genocide is the most recent point in case. Once population control is addressed through a population stabilization law, the need for false courts and phony justice will evaporate, and anyone who as much as dreams about covering up depopulation crimes will have to suffer capital punishment. Henceforth, any false judges and refusals to prosecute depopulation crimes will be seen and punished as subversive acts against mankind and as acts of sabotage against civilization. This will re-establish justice and anchor our civilization in it. 3. Equity and the right to equality are sacrosanct. History has shown again and again that once a social class assumes special privileges and monopolizes the wealth created by the labor of others, society descends into hell. Today, we have the largest wealth inequality in history, dwarfing even the inequality suffered by the people at the hands of the aristocracy during the Middle Ages. The concentration of half the global wealth in the hands of the 0.001% is what enables the world's governments to use the world's billionaires as bankers of the strategy to turn the wealth we create against us. More than this, the individuals chosen by the system to deprive mankind of the wealth we create, the likes of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, of Jeff Bezos and Bernard Arnault, of Larry Ellison and David Rubenstein, and of George Soros and Cyrus Poonawalla, to name but a few, have the gall to impersonate the roles of philanthropists and environmentalists when in reality they are nothing but petty criminals and the world's biggest polluters. Once population control is addressed through a population stabilization law, the need for billionaire criminals posing as philanthropists and environmentalists will no longer be necessary, and anyone who as much as thinks about owning or earning 10 times more than the lowest paid person on the planet will suffer capital punishment. Henceforth, any attempts at concentrating wealth in the hands of a few will be seen and punished as subversive acts against mankind and as acts of sabotage against our civilization. This will reestablish equity and anchor our civilization in it. 4. Morality and ethics are sacrosanct. The world's spiritual leaders serve as paragons of morality and have monopolized the right to defend interpret, and redefine the moral and ethical standards by which every human being in every culture must live. As spiritual leaders, it is their role to show mankind an ethical way out of the impasse we find ourselves in during the last stage of the population stabilization program, which by necessity requires depopulation. Where are they? Why are they hiding? What keeps them silent? Why must I, a common citizen with no position of spiritual authority whatsoever and with no claim to power, wealth, privilege, or high office, have to sacrifice my life to save mankind from itself by providing that much needed moral leadership to guide mankind out of the dangerous predicament it finds itself in? I have already pledged to die by RAD, required assisted dying, at age 75. Why did Pope Francis drag his old bones around for 88 years while pretending to be the spiritual leader of Christendom? Why are his cardinals and bishops not leading by example by availing themselves of RAD? Their median age is already well above 75. The median age of the 220 cardinals who make up the College of Cardinals is 78.5 years. So far, our spiritual leaders have only shown that they're very good at conniving with governments to contrive plans for our mass murder. They're very good at sacrificing us, but lousy at making sacrifices. And if I am doing their jobs while they parade among us as paragons of morality without any merit whatsoever to such lofty titles, am I not the true spiritual leader of the world? Any and all depopulation objectives pursued in secret and outside and above the law, as well as in violation of the moral and ethical standards that our cultures and religions profess, are by definition immoral and illegal. Yet I am the only person on this planet, out of 8.2 billion souls, the only one who takes a stand and who actually lives by the moral, ethical, legal, and humanitarian standards that religions, governments, legislatures, and courts of law profess. This being the case, then I alone have earned the right to assume control of the world and to govern the 8.2 billion lost souls and sinners out of the existential dread and dead end mankind finds itself in, and lead them towards a higher and more enlightened civilization. I will therefore lead the planetary well-being authority that will enforce the population stabilization law globally, since no one else has earned this role, is capable of this awesome task, or can be trusted with this divine responsibility. I am henceforth the spiritual anchor of mankind, and by default, since no one else had the courage to step forward, I alone will defend, interpret, and redefine the moral and ethical standards by which every human being on this planet will henceforth live and die. Where are the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative powers of state? Why have they not legislated a solution to the population problem? Why am I doing their work and sacrificing my life? After all, I'm not paid for this. They are. I will get no pension for 16 years of sacrifices so far. They will. If they are incapable of providing a solution, why are they still in power? They are useless. I alone have found a legal, moral, and fair solution, while they have all been in hiding, conniving with spiritual authorities, and contriving plans to sterilize and prematurely kill us all. I will therefore lead the planetary well-being authority that will enforce a population stabilization law globally, since no one else has earned this role, is capable of this awesome task, or can be trusted with this earthly responsibility. I am henceforth the governing anchor of mankind, and by default. Since no one else had the courage to step forward, I alone will conceive, draft, and pass the laws by which every human being on this planet will henceforth live and die. 5. Only by respecting the three components of the population stabilization law will we wash away our individual and collective sins. For how can one speak of morality in a world where mothers do not bat an eyelid at aborting their unborn children, but refuse to consider leaving this earth a few years earlier to give the next generation a chance at happiness too? If we can kill babies, we can kill ourselves. How can one speak of morality when the first and last precondition for employment is to lie to yourself that you're not working for the devil? If we can live a lie, we can face the truth. How can one speak of morality when our men-at-arms have made us their enemies simply because we exist, and their honor to defend the people has been replaced with a dishonor to harm us all? If we can kill others in secret and for all the wrong reasons, we can kill ourselves openly for all the right reasons. How can one speak of morality when everything is the opposite of what it is supposed to be, and everyone is the opposite of who he or she pretends to be? If we can wear a mask throughout life, we can take it off to face death. How can one speak of morality when our spiritual, political, and intellectual leaders connive to commit genocide? If they can agree in secret that killing is necessary, we can agree openly that killing ourselves is necessary. Once the global population stabilization law is in place, no one will need to lie anymore or wear a mask. We will live in a moral world for the first time in our miserable history. This will give us a moral world and anchor our civilization in a higher morality that prejudices none, sacrifices none, and ignores none, but that demands from all to leave their prejudices behind, to sacrifice willingly, and to mind the rights of all creatures on this earth and of all generations of humans to come. 6. It is immoral to sacrifice those at the beginning of life for those at the end of life. And it is immoral because the old must sacrifice for the young, not vice versa, when society's resources are scarce. It is immoral to spend society's resources to prolong the years of dying, and in so doing deprive the young of the means of living. It is immoral to ask a generation to bear the burden of two older generations and deprive them of the means to care for the next generation. It is immoral to selfishly refuse to have two children and thus ensure the perpetuation of the species and the demographic stability of society. And it is immoral to seek a life of leisure and to consume the world's resources and society's fruits selfishly without having contributed much or anything to the civilization that shelters us all. Solidarity must be shown by the old towards the young in this unprecedented situation that was created by the decisions of the old with which now the young must live. The old created this situation, the old must fix it. And solidarity must be shown by the young towards the old by fulfilling their reproductive duties and by being economic assets and not liabilities. This will end the role of governments as predators and the fate of people as prey. There will no longer be a predatory-prey relationship between governments and people. This is the ethical, intergenerational solidarity we need to re-establish the demographic, economic, social, and environmental stability of our civilization. 7. The baby boomers born 1946 to 1964 and Generation X born 1965 to 1979 are the first two generations in history that did not have to fight in war, take part in mandatory military service, experience famine, or live in extreme poverty. We owe this to the population control program. None of us had to die in the flower of our youth, starve, or beg. All we are asked to do is give up the last 5 to 10 years of our lives, the years of old age and chronic illness, of aching joints and wrinkled faces, of lost potence, lost vigor, lost enthusiasm, and lost friends. Pay it forward so the generations that come after us can survive, prosper, and procreate. The millennials born 1980 to 1994 will reach retirement age by 2045. Generation Z born 1995 to 2012 by 2060. And Generation Alpha born 2013 to 2025 by 2078. Thanks to the sacrifices that will be made by the baby boomers and Generation X through their adherence to the required assisted dying at age 75, the millennials and Generation Alpha may only need RAD at age 80. And Generation Alpha and those coming after it will probably be fine with RAD at 85. The Planetary Wellbeing Authority will determine this in light of the statistics and conditions at that time. What is certain is that we must all make sacrifices For just as all generations that precede us have paid it forward by making sacrifices to ensure the perpetuation of the species and the evolution of civilization, so must we and all the generations that will come after us, because life and civilization will continue to face existential issues. This is the ethical intergenerational solidarity we need to secure the future of mankind and to shelter our children's children from war, famine, disease, and discord. 8. The sacrifices we make for our children and our children's children and all future generations have equally beneficial outcomes for all other species with whom we share this planet, and without whom life on Earth will not only be barren and unpleasant, it will also eventually become impossible. By eliminating the need to compete for resources between the members of our species, since we will depend only on renewable resources, we will be able to leave untouched the land and resources needed for the survival of all other species. Continuing as usual is out of the question, as that will only aggravate the 6th mass extinction, which we are causing, and that unless we stop and reverse, will be the end of our own species. This is the ethical intra-species solidarity we need to secure the future of mankind on a pristine and life-filled planet. During the early days of our existence, when our civilization was just beginning and our understanding of our planet and its ecosystems was limited, we outgrew the food resources provided by the land we originally inhabited and were forced to expand into new lands by chasing wild herds of herbivores. In this fashion, we have exterminated countless species throughout our existence as hunter-gatherers, until eventually we're forced to settle the land, become agriculturalists, and grow our own food. Be it as hunter-gatherers or as agriculturalists, we experienced many population collapses, just as we caused the population collapses of many other species. It took generations and great suffering to restore our numbers at the pace at which nature allowed us to. During the early days of our settled civilizations, we rebalanced our numbers from one generation to the next through conflict, famine, death, and disease. We now have sufficient knowledge to maintain a stable and sustainable human population and to enable sustainable and stable populations for all other species. We can plan and act early to prevent population collapse, be it our own or of other species. We can therefore control the relationship between past, present, and future events and conditions. This is the intertemporal foresight and continuity we need to secure the future of mankind and its well-being, as well as the future of all other species and their well-being. 9. Under the current system, sterilizing, sickening, and prematurely killing people has become the most lucrative industry on the planet and the only one that is fully government-sponsored and wholly sanctioned by organized religions to ensure maximum profits for the miscreants who participate in it and zero consequences for the crimes against humanity they commit. Our heads of state and government and our spiritual leaders have surrendered the world to pure evil. Let me repeat that. Our heads of state and government and our spiritual leaders have surrendered the world to pure evil. Why? How can that be? First, because they have no faith in mankind and believe we're just senseless animals driven by our basic instincts, incapable of high-order thinking and unwilling to sacrifice anything for the common good. While they are, for the most part, right, I believe, in fact, I know, we can outgrow our limitations when we have to, and now, more than ever, we have to. Second, because they are prisoners of the organizations, systems, and worldviews they represent. The Church has always condemned suicide and abortion, and to change course now would contradict not only its teachings, but also its claim to infallibility. And governments are beholden to the law which states that it must respect the right to live and reproduce. To change course now, even if they could, would invalidate their democratic claims. And third, they are afraid of what will happen if they provide full disclosure, which they must if mankind is to understand the dire situation we're in, accept the reality and act accordingly. Fear of full disclosure and its consequences, fear of becoming obsolete, fear of losing power over society, and fear of the domino effect of changes legislation will trigger, hold them prisoner to silence and passivity. The existing political and spiritual structures, therefore, also stand in the way. Politicians cannot openly transgress the bounds of democracy without invalidating it. And priests cannot openly transgress the bounds of dogma without invalidating their religion. They transgress them instead secretly to preserve the illusion of democracy and morality. Let me repeat that. They transgress them instead secretly to preserve the illusion of democracy and morality. While openly they could do absolutely nothing to address mankind's existential issues, secretly they could and they did. They had to. After all, to do nothing and let civilization crash would be irresponsible and suicidal and would invalidate centuries of sacrifices. Consequently, they devised the many secret, coercive, and manipulative methods of population control now in use and have feigned their adherence to Christian morals and to democratic values, all of which they violate with impunity. But continuing to use covert, coercive, and manipulative methods of depopulation and damage the genetic and intellectual endowment of mankind is immoral, destructive, and idiotic, since it condemns us to biological collapse, our civilization to social, political, and economic collapse, and our species to extinction. The only option, therefore, is a legislative solution whose rationale every human being on the planet must understand, so that everyone abides by replacement level fertility, required assisted dying at age 75, and optimal population levels. The resources of government are limited, and irrespective how powerful the armed forces may be, the power of the people is that much greater. But if you refuse to accept the only decent, fair, equitable, and just solution, you condemn yourself and your children to a life of hell, and you condemn civilization to collapse and our species to extinction. It is that simple. Organized religions gave us a social conscience to be able to coexist peacefully and productively in society. I give you a planetary consciousness to be able to solve the existential problems we face and continue into the future. None of us is born with a social conscience, yet none of us dies without one. It is an appendage we acquire through the socialization process to peacefully coexist in society. Likewise, none of us is born with a planetary consciousness, yet henceforth none of us will die without one. It is an appendage we acquire through our understanding of the existential challenges we face and the sacrifices they require from us to survive and thrive. It is an extended civility, an expanded awareness, and an inclusive compassion. We live in a global civilization and enjoy its fruits. We must therefore think and feel in global terms. We must have a planetary consciousness. A social conscience is no longer enough. That is the appendage needed for a world of nation states, not for a global civilization. Until we outgrow our selfishness and ignorance, our prejudices and misconceptions, and our fears and doubts, we are but primitive apes, and we will live and die as such. The knowledge I give the world about the existential issues we face is the seed of the planetary consciousness that will grow within you, but that you must water every day and care for lovingly, otherwise it will not bloom, but wither away in your soul and die along with you as civilization collapses. No one can hide in silence, in the crowd, or behind the system from our existential problems. They affect us all in equal measure, and they are so daunting that our secular and spiritual leaders have no clue how to solve them. I do, and have provided the solution in the form of a population stabilization law. Embrace it, and you will survive. Try to hide, and you will die. When civilization collapses, you will go down with it, and we cannot allow that to happen. 10. By now, you will have realized that we have nothing to lose and everything to gain from a population stabilization law. The benefits are legion. I could spend the next 5 years outlining in great detail what you will gain. And you could spend the rest of your life reading my tome, but what would be the point of that? So I will resume myself to a few key points. You will have a society of decency and truth again. You will have a government that need not lie anymore and classify its dirty depopulation secrets under the pretext of national security. You will have honest journalists that brighten, not dim your minds. And you will have doctors that heal, not kill. And you will have lawyers that work for justice, not for injustice. Crime will become a curiosity that will be studied by the dead science of criminology. You will have businessmen that work for your enrichment, not for your impoverishment. You will have scientists that invent gadgets and methods to make our lives better, not to cripple our children and numb our minds and penises. No parent will bury their child anymore. Poverty will be a thing of the past. Sickness will be as rare as solar eclipses, and injustice will exist in fiction only. No one will die alone anymore. Not unless they want to, that is. No one will die unhealthy anymore. No one will know chronic illness anymore. And no one will die without their affairs in order anymore. No man will shoot blanks anymore. No woman will have barren ovaries anymore. No couple will feel shame and inadequacy of not being able to conceive anymore. Children will brighten our homes, streets, and parks again. Children's voices will fill the air again. The elderly will not know loneliness and will not be forgotten and shunned. The elderly will be full of life and energy again, so much so that they will actually want to be with their grandchildren and will be able to keep up with them too. No child will be stuck in an institution anymore, be it a creche, a kindergarten, an after-school center, or an orphanage. There will be no more orphans, and there will be no more absent parents. There will be no more criminals and no more prisons. There will be no more poverty and no more filth. Prosperity will be universal, and there will be no more borders, armies, bombs, and weapons. You will have love and truth and light at every turn, for there will be happiness wherever you turn. Nature will abound around us once again and count us as its own and not as its destroyers. The overall effect of a population stabilization law is that it will generate a just, fair, prosperous, truthful civilization that is largely self-governing, self-regulating, and self-balancing. Yes, my friends, it is possible to have a moral, just, and equitable society, but not if you keep following the criminals, cretins, and cowards who lead you now. Thank you for your attention.